Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Filmmaker Charlie Shackleton was hot on the trail of the next great American true crime documentary, a riveting account of a highway patrolman's quixotic effort to identify and capture the infamous Zodiac Killer. He had all of it laid out, ready to go. It is a beautiful documentary film, truly. It's called the Zodiac Killer Project, and we're joined today by the director, Charlie Shackleton. Charlie, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you for having me.
As I said to you before we get started, I interview a lot of documentary filmmakers, and I always admire their tenacity and their being able to identify a great story when they hear it and moving forward, and all the patience of a Buddhist monk to be able to complete these things. And let's talk about the origin story, but also what was the kernel of the thought in your mind to take this particular approach? And we'll get into specifics of that. How did this come to you?
So as I talk about in the film, I had been trying to make this true crime documentary, um, and that fell apart in the way that many of these things do, which is that I wasn't able to secure the rights to a book that I was hoping to adapt. Um, but what the mistake I had made was allowing myself to really conceptualize the entire film before I had those rights in place, which, as any documentary filmmaker will tell you, is a real mistake. I had really mapped out image by image, scene by scene, the shape of this thing and how I imagined playing it out. And so then after that project fell apart, I found myself just like regaling friends with this film that could now not ever exist. And I figured I'd get that out of my system eventually and move on and do something else. But instead, it just kept going. And so eventually that itself started to feel like an interesting subject for film, that feeling of an unrealized creative ambition. And I wondered whether it would be possible to make a film that could do that, that could kind of conjure the sensation of a film that didn't exist, without obviously any of the actual content of the thing, because I didn't have the rights, so I couldn't really put any of what was so exciting to me about the project in this film. I just had to kind of create the sensation of how I imagined it would have felt to watch it.
I will tell you, there's a number of things you accomplished in this, turning lemons into lemonade, and that is you pull back the curtain on filmmaking in a sense, the creative process that goes into it. And also, and I want to be careful, you have to guide me in this conversation because I do not want to give away anything more than I need to or have to in our discussion. So while I want to talk about your process and in terms of how you went about doing this, because you had already done so much research as you alluded to in terms of being able to put this film together. And you had to navigate a kind of a tricky, fraught path to tell the story in the way you wanted to tell the story. There's so many different little nooks and crannies of this film that I really enjoyed exploring with you. And let me know, just in terms of, because in the telling of the story, you identify things that you really can't talk about, that you know that, or that you're at least privy to information. How did you navigate? I mean, just sort of, how much do you want to tell us about the story itself that we see in the film? Help me here a little bit.
Yeah, so the book that I was going to adapt was called The Silenced Badge, and it was written by a California Highway Patrol officer called Lyndon Lafferty, who spent the last 50 or so years of his life pursuing his suspect in the Zodiac Killer case.
Before you
And
go any further, do we need to identify the scope of the Zodiac Killer before we get too far into this? Or do
oh
you,
yeah, certainly, I'm definitely guilty of assuming everyone already knows all of this.
yeah, yeah,
So the
exactly.
Zodiac Killer was a serial killer in Bay Area in California in the late 60s. He killed, or rather, he I'm forgetting this is the thing. So many different versions of this story. I'm forgetting what the like core of it is. But he attacked a series of couples in the Bay Area in 1968 and 1969. But what really made him infamous was that in the subsequent years, he sent letters and cryptograms to various San Francisco newspapers. And so he kind of built his own public identity as this, killer at large and a very theatrical one at that. And as such, he kind of set the mold in a lot of ways for the contemporary serial killer. Had a big influence on popular culture. The serial killer in Dirty Harry is based on him, as well as various others. And over the years, lots and lots of books and films and TV shows, podcasts have been made about this case because it remains unsolved. And among them was this book written by this highway patrol officer who had his own personal suspect, who he pursued for many years. And Lyndon Lafferty, the highway patrolman in question, he sadly passed away about 10 years ago. But just before, or a few years before his death, he published this book that sort of laid out his case against his suspect. And so I'd read that book and had been kind of drawn in, not only by the story, but by how cinematic it felt to me. It felt like had really ripe potential for adaptation into a true crime documentary. And so I was endeavoring to get the rights to that book, but sadly was unable. And that's what left me in the position of making a film about creative frustration and failure instead.
And again, and you're absolutely right. The Zodiac Killer has penetrated our perception, serial killers, Batman movies. I mean, there's so many areas of popular culture where he has become kind of an iconic presence, if you will. So you realize that at some point in this journey that you're not going to be able to make the film that you wanted in the way you wanted to. And you land on this idea of really, and again, I said at the beginning of our conversation, kind of deconstructing what we take in terms of these kinds of films. Our expectations are sort of built into the telling of this kind of a story. With working with your team of producers and people you're working with, when you first approached them with this idea, or was it a collaborative effort? Did you sort of decide it as a group, or basically just sort of unpacking that in terms of how you're going to tell this story for us?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a pretty small team when we went out to California to shoot the film, or rather, kind of shoot the absence of a film. It was me and my two producers, Catherine and Anthony, and then our cinematographer, senior Patricia, and our focus puller, Alex Tan. And so it was just this tiny little gang of us going around to all of these locations where I had planned to shoot this true crime documentary and just sort of filming the space, filming the absence of a true crime documentary. And I didn't necessarily have an entirely clear sense at that point of how the film was going to function, but my headline concept was that I wanted it to kind of describe that unmade film in real time.
Yeah.
That was sort of the challenge I set myself, is like, can you hold people's attention? Can you create something that makes some kind of narrative sense when you're just kind of going through beat by beat and telling people what they would have seen? And in many cases, not even being able to tell people what they would have seen, because obviously I can't really talk about a lot of what's in the book because I don't have the rights to it. So I'm in the position a lot of the time of just saying to the audience, something dramatic happens here. Imagine that you're experiencing something dramatic. And the challenge of that for me, but the fun of that was seeing if people would go with it, and people would like follow me down this very kind of weird creative road and actually feel wrapped up in a story that they weren't hearing a lot of.
Well, let me say that you give us a lot of information. Your story is plausible for sure. I mean, it's more than plausible. It's intriguing, interesting, and in a way, it's what a lot of the people who have grown up in, watching this genre, becoming amateur sleuths. We've got a lot of examples of people who have become kind of the go-to people for to investigate these kinds of crimes. And it is in some ways you are mirroring their what they would be doing in search of the truth in this. So it just kind it just there's just so it's so creative. I'm so glad that you made this film in the way you did because I feel more of a as an active participant than I would have in a film of this genre, this kind, done by a lot of other really good filmmakers. I'm not belittling their skill set here, but that kind of feel of what, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm doing a good job of describing it, but I feel like one of the sleuths who would be doing what you and would, you pulled us into this particular way of telling the story. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I was very struck by that again and again, how similar the task of the true crime filmmaker is to the task of the true crime detective.
Yeah.
You know, you're not only in terms of like trying to craft the most persuasive narrative about a series of events that lots of people are telling a story about and vying to create the dominant narrative of, but also kind of, thinking along the same sort of dramatic lines. Like, these you might think of like a amateur sleuth or a online theorist as someone who's just like collating evidence and trying to present it to, prove their point. But it very rarely works like that. They're almost always instead trying to craft a story and trying to like draw people in through exactly the same sorts of narrative devices that a filmmaker would use or an author.
By the way, we're talking with the director of the film Zodiac Killer project. That would be Charlie Shackleton. It is being released through a great distributor. Music Box Films is a wonderful distributor, and it will be in the IFC Center on Friday, November 21st, as well as expanding beyond that on the 28th. And it'll be here in Los Angeles and Chicago on December 5th. So really seek this out. It's really, it's just a fun watch. You're a insightful humor. You've got a sense of humor about this, but there's also a seriousness to the work here. And I got, like I said earlier, I don't want to give anything more away than I should. But I'll just say the fishbowl thing was just fishbowl, okay, for people when you see it.
That's just a little
Really,
Easter egg for
yeah,
people who've seen it.
really,
Yeah.
yeah. It feels like you were the edge of, he was near one way or the other. I think would have it may have been something of a tipping point in terms of his pursuit.
That
Yeah,
was certainly the scene that caught my attention the most when I read the book. That was the thing that I really thought like, okay, there's a film in this.
yeah, well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, it's terrific stuff. And the way it's shot, this everything about this. If you like the true crime genre, and if you like something that's entertaining in terms of just how a story is told, and you have fun with these tropes, you have fun with the way that they would be playing out in a lot of other films. I have to tell you, watching that part of it, just sort of letting that stuff sink in, I realized that you can be manipulated I mean, in a way that is maybe not fair to a viewer who wants to believe a certain point of view or the point of view of the filmmaker who's making the film. So I appreciate that. And as sort of as someone who watches a lot of films, I just thought that was another element to the film to the Zodiac Killer project that really is compelling about it. So thank you.
No, thank you. It was lovely to hear.
Well, I don't, again, I want people to see this. Do we have any sort of beyond the release, the theatrical release? Are we looking at something down the line yet? Or is it,
Yeah, definitely. I don't know the exact dates yet, but yeah, it's going to be in
okay.
theaters from the 21st November and then
Yeah.
expanding and then down the line there'll be
Just,
discs, I'm sure there'll be streaming, all the classic things.
there'll be parades
Just,
down Main Street. Yeah.
drop me an
Okay.
email, I'll just come around and show it to you on my laptop. Like however people want to see it.
I love the scenes with you in the studio and the kind of the interaction with the people that you're working with. It's a really entertaining film, and again, told from a perspective that we don't. I don't think I've ever seen one told this way. I was going back to The Thin Blue Line. For some reason, my mind went back there in terms of sort of the structure, the sort of pulling the curtain back, and all of the things that film did for me. That's a seminal film in my mind in terms of this kind of genre, but also the positive impact a film can have on the lives of people in ways that were completely unbelievable at the time. Well, Charlie Shackleton, thank you so very much for Zodiac Killer Project. I look forward to more. I hope you're working on something and you'll come back and join us again here on Cinemaphile. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.